Silence is misunderstood. In a world that rewards noise, the loudest voice often gets attention. But attention is not the same as power. And noise is not the same as presence. Quiet men are often underestimated at first. They don't rush to speak. They don't compete for airtime. They don't narrate their every thought. And because of that, people project onto them mystery, depth, control, or sometimes fear. But not fear in the way most people think. Not fear of aggression. Fear of unpredictability. Fear of not being able to read them. Fear of not knowing how to control the interaction. Because here is a psychological truth. People feel safest around those they can predict. And quiet men are harder to predict. When someone talks constantly, you learn their patterns quickly. Their triggers. Their insecurities. Their humor. Their biases. They expose themselves through volume. But when someone speaks selectively, when they observe more than they react, when they pause before answering, you cannot easily map them. And what cannot be mapped feels powerful. Silence creates psychological tension. And tension demands attention. Have you ever noticed how the quietest person in a heated room suddenly becomes the focal point when they finally speak? That's not coincidence. That's weight. Silence builds weight. Because while others are spending energy trying to dominate the space, the quiet person is conserving it. And conserved energy feels controlled. Controlled energy feels dangerous. Not physically. Psychologically. If you've ever been in a room where someone said very little but everyone seemed aware of them, you already understand this dynamic. That's presence. Presence is not volume. Presence is stability. Comment presence if you've witnessed this before. Silence makes people uncomfortable for a reason. Most humans rely on verbal cues to regulate themselves. When someone smiles, we relax. When someone explains themselves, we feel in control. When someone reacts emotionally, we understand the dynamic. But when someone stays quiet, there are fewer cues. And fewer cues create uncertainty. Uncertainty activates the brain. The human mind fills in blanks. When someone is overly expressive, you don't need to guess. When someone is restrained, you must interpret. And interpretation requires projection. Projection creates mystery. Mystery creates tension. And tension often translates into respect or fear. But here's the key. It's not the silence alone. It's composed silence. There's a difference between awkward silence and controlled silence. Awkward silence feels insecure. Controlled silence feels intentional. Controlled silence communicates. I don't need to fill this space. I am comfortable here. I am not pressured to perform. That level of comfort unsettles insecure people. Because insecure people rely on constant validation through words. When they encounter someone who doesn't need that, it disrupts the dynamic. They may interpret it as arrogance. They may interpret it as coldness. But often, it's simply self-containment. Quiet men are feared not because they threaten, but because they do not reveal everything. And people fear what they cannot easily categorize. Think about this honestly. Have you ever felt slightly intimidated by someone who spoke very little but seemed completely calm? Not because they were aggressive, but because you couldn't read them fully. That is the psychological weight of silence. If this resonates, comment weight. Because silence carries weight. Now let's go deeper. The reason silence feels powerful is because it often signals emotional control. Most people react immediately. They interrupt. They defend. They argue. They overshare. Reactions are common. Control is rare. When someone remains silent during tension, it communicates restraint. Restraint implies discipline. And discipline commands respect. In arguments, the person who reacts first often loses psychological ground. Why? Because reaction suggests emotional stimulation. And emotional stimulation suggests influence. If I can provoke you into reacting, I have influenced you. But if you remain calm, if you observe before responding, if you choose your words carefully, you communicate one thing: I am not easily moved. And the person who is not easily moved cannot easily be controlled. That's where the fear comes from. It's not fear of violence. It's fear of lack of access. Lack of leverage. Quiet men often don't give emotional leverage away. They don't overshare insecurities. They don't reveal every internal struggle. They don't react dramatically to minor challenges. And that makes manipulation difficult. People fear what they cannot manipulate. This is especially visible in conflict. Imagine someone raises their voice. You respond with silence. Not passive silence. Steady silence. You maintain eye contact. You breathe slowly. You speak when you choose to. That composure shifts the power dynamic immediately. The loud person now looks unstable. The quiet person looks grounded. And grounded energy feels dominant without trying. If you've ever won an argument by saying less, comment calm. Because calm is often louder than noise. Let's bring this into the real world. Work environments are social hierarchies disguised as professionalism. Even in collaborative spaces, perception shapes influence. And perception is shaped less by how much you say, and more by how controlled you appear when you say it. In most meetings, you'll notice something predictable. There are always a few people who speak often. They jump in quickly. They explain themselves extensively. They defend their points before anyone even challenges them. And then there's usually one person who says very little. They observe. They take notes. They don't interrupt. And when they finally speak, the room quiets. Why? Because silence builds anticipation. When someone rarely speaks, their words feel filtered. And filtered speech feels intentional. Intentional speech carries weight. Now contrast that with someone who speaks constantly. Even if they're intelligent, their ideas begin to lose impact through repetition. Frequency reduces perceived value. Rarity increases it. That's a psychological principle that applies everywhere. In the workplace, quiet men are often perceived as calculated, strategic, emotionally stable, hard to read. And that last one matters. If someone can't easily read your emotional state, they cannot easily exploit it. Many workplace dynamics revolve around subtle emotional leverage. People test reactions. They provoke. They question your ideas not to learn, but to see how you respond. If you react defensively, you reveal insecurity. If you over-explain, you reveal anxiety. But if you respond calmly, briefly, and stop talking, you shift the entire atmosphere. Example: someone says in a meeting, "I'm not sure that's the best approach." The reactive response: "Well, I actually looked at the data and considered several angles, and I think if you look at it this way." The controlled response: "It's the most efficient option based on the numbers." Pause. Silence. The pause forces the other person to either ask a clear follow-up question or withdraw. You didn't scramble. You didn't over-defend. You didn't seek validation. And that composure increases perceived authority. Quiet men in professional settings are often feared not because they intimidate, but because they are difficult to destabilize. And in environments where everyone is competing subtly for position, the most stable person naturally rises. If you've ever noticed someone gaining authority without raising their voice, comment authority. Because authority is composure under pressure. Now let's move into relationships. Because this is where silence becomes even more powerful. Attraction is not built on noise. It's built on emotional stability. When someone is constantly talking, explaining, clarifying, oversharing, it removes tension. And tension is part of attraction. Not toxic tension. Psychological tension. The kind that makes someone lean forward instead of pulling back. Quiet men create emotional space. And space creates curiosity. Curiosity builds intrigue. Intrigue increases attraction. But let's be clear. We are not talking about playing games. We are talking about emotional self-containment. Many men destroy their own leverage by oversharing too quickly. They explain their feelings immediately. They seek reassurance repeatedly. They text long paragraphs clarifying tone. That behavior signals need. Need lowers perceived value. When someone appears emotionally self-sufficient, it signals internal strength. And strength is attractive. Imagine two scenarios. Scenario 1. She doesn't respond for a few hours. He sends, "Hey, just making sure everything's okay. I didn't mean to say anything wrong earlier. If I did, I'm sorry." Anxiety revealed. Scenario 2. She doesn't respond for a few hours. He does nothing. When she replies, he responds normally. No emotional spillover. No accusation. No insecurity. That silence communicates something subtle. I am not dependent on your immediate validation. And that independence creates gravity. People are drawn to those who appear emotionally anchored. Quiet men are feared in relationships because they do not reveal all their emotional leverage at once. They do not chase reactions. They do not overreact to small disturbances. And that composure creates mystery. Mystery does not mean deception. It means controlled disclosure. Not every thought needs to be spoken. Not every insecurity needs to be shared immediately. Emotional timing is power. Silence gives you timing. But here's the balance. Silence must be calm, not punishing. If silence is used to manipulate, it backfires. If silence is used to regulate yourself, it empowers you. The difference is intention. Ask yourself honestly. When you talk excessively in relationships, are you trying to connect? Or are you trying to secure reassurance? That distinction changes everything. If this section resonates with your past experiences, comment gravity. Because attraction follows gravity, not desperation. Conflict reveals character. Anyone can appear composed when things are smooth. But during conflict, emotional truth surfaces. Most people lose control during confrontation. Their voice rises. Their breathing quickens. They interrupt. They defend. And every visible reaction gives the other person leverage. The moment someone sees they can provoke you, they gain influence. Provocation is a power test. Silence under provocation is psychological dominance. Not dominance over the person. Dominance over yourself. Imagine someone insults you in front of others. The reactive response. Immediate defense. The controlled response. eye contact, pause, measured reply, or sometimes no reply at all. That stillness forces the aggressor into an awkward position, because aggression relies on reaction. Without reaction, aggression collapses. This is why calm individuals often appear intimidating. They are not predictable. You cannot escalate them easily. You cannot draw them into emotional chaos. And chaos is where insecure people feel powerful. Quiet men do not enter chaos. They observe it. And observation creates distance. Distance creates control. This is the core of the fear dynamic. People fear those who cannot be emotionally controlled. Not physically. Emotionally. If I cannot provoke you, I cannot steer you. If I cannot read you easily, I cannot anticipate your moves. That uncertainty unsettles people who rely on emotional leverage. But here is something important. True strength is not silent avoidance. It is silent confidence. If someone disrespects you repeatedly, silence alone is not the solution. Firm boundaries are. Silence in conflict is not about suppressing truth. It's about choosing timing. Timing is everything. Speak when it matters, not when emotions spike. The man who speaks less during conflict often wins more long-term influence, because he appears measured. And measured responses feel dangerous in a calm way. If you've ever watched someone lose an argument simply by staying calm, comment control. Because control is louder than volume. Silence does something most people don't expect. It filters. When you talk constantly, you give everyone access to you. Your emotions, your reactions, your insecurities, your approval patterns. But when you reduce unnecessary speech, something shifts. People reveal themselves more. Why? Because silence creates space. And in space, people fill the gaps. The insecure talk more. The manipulative probe more. The anxious overshare. The dominant try to test. Silence is a mirror. It reflects the other person back to themselves. Imagine sitting with someone who speaks little but listens deeply. Most people cannot tolerate that for long. They begin talking more than they intended. They reveal information they didn't plan to share. They expose motivations accidentally. Why? Because silence makes people self-conscious. When there's no immediate feedback, people attempt to regulate the interaction themselves. And in doing so, they expose their emotional baseline. This is why negotiators are trained to use silence. After stating a number, they pause. The silence pressures the other person. Often, the other person speaks first. And when someone speaks first in tension, they often concede something. Now apply that socially. When you stop reacting immediately, when you stop filling emotional gaps, when you stop over-explaining, people begin revealing more about themselves than you reveal about yourself. And that creates asymmetry. Asymmetry creates leverage. Not for harm, but for awareness. Quiet men are feared because they collect more information than they give. They observe patterns. They notice tone shifts. They watch body language. While others are busy expressing themselves, the quiet man is mapping the room. That mapping builds strategic advantage. Insecure people sense this. And insecurity fears exposure. Have you ever noticed how some people become uncomfortable around someone who simply watches calmly? They try to provoke a reaction. They crack jokes. They test. Because they want to break the silence. Silence removes performance cues. Without cues, insecure people lose footing. That discomfort sometimes gets labeled as intimidation. But it's not intimidation. It's stability in a world addicted to noise. If you've ever seen someone expose themselves just by talking too much in a quiet room, comment observe. Because observation is power. Let's clarify something important. Silence does not automatically equal power. Some people are quiet because they are anxious. Some are quiet because they are withdrawn. Some are quiet because they feel inferior. That is not the silence we are talking about. There is a difference between passive quiet and intentional quiet. Passive quiet shrinks. Intentional quiet expands. Passive quiet avoids eye contact. Intentional quiet holds eye contact calmly. Passive quiet feels unsure. Intentional quiet feels settled. The power of silence comes from intention. If you are silent because you are afraid to speak, that energy is felt. If you are silent because you choose when to speak, that energy is also felt. The difference is internal posture. The quiet strategist is not afraid. He is selective. He is not socially incapable. He is socially controlled. He knows that not every thought requires expression. He understands that words are tools. And tools should be used precisely, not constantly. There is strength in the withholding reaction. There is strength in listening longer than others. There is strength in answering briefly. This does not mean you avoid conversation. It means you remove compulsive speech. Ask yourself, when you speak a lot, is it because you want to share? Or because you feel uncomfortable in silence? That question reveals everything. If you fear silence, you will fill it. If you control silence, you will shape it. And shaping the emotional environment is influential. Influence without noise is rare. And rare feels powerful. If you're starting to understand that this is about control, not personality, comment intent. Because intention defines the difference. Silent presence is built intentionally. It is not automatic. It requires discipline. First, slow your reactions. When someone speaks, don't rush to respond. Let 1 second pass. Then 2. That pause recalibrates your nervous system. Second, control facial reactions. Most people reveal emotion instantly through micro-expressions. Practice neutral listening. Not cold. Neutral. Third, speak in complete sentences. Not long ones. Complete ones. Avoid filler words. Avoid nervous laughter. Fourth, reduce unnecessary validation phrases. Instead of, yeah, I get what you're saying. Try, I understand. Short. Controlled. Fifth, maintain steady posture. Body language communicates more than words. If your body is restless, your silence loses impact. Stillness amplifies quiet power. But here is the deeper layer. Silent presence comes from internal peace. If your mind is chaotic, silence will feel unbearable. If your mind is disciplined, silence will feel natural. Meditation helps. Breathing control helps. Physical training helps. All build nervous system regulation. Because at the end of the day, silence is nervous system mastery. The quiet man is not suppressing chaos. He has reduced chaos. And reduction of chaos creates composure. Composure commands respect. You don't need to become mysterious intentionally. You need to become centered. Centering reduces impulsive speech. Impulsive speech reduces perceived strength. Now imagine walking into a room and saying nothing for the first few minutes. You observe. You listen. When you finally contribute, It's sharp. That pattern alone shifts perception. People begin to anticipate your words. Anticipation increases value. Value increases influence. And influence, when paired with calmness, creates that subtle fear people talk about. Not fear of harm. Fear of being outmatched emotionally. If you're ready to practice controlled silence this week, comment discipline. Because silence is discipline made visible. The world mistakes noise for power. But the power is not loud. It is steady. The quiet strategist does not seek attention. He is attracted to it. He does not chase validation. He projects stability. He does not overshare emotion. He regulates it. And because of that, he feels difficult to move. And what cannot be moved easily is respected. Sometimes feared, but never ignored. Silence is not about hiding. It is about conserving. Conserving words. Conserving reactions. Conserving emotional energy. When you stop competing for space, you start owning it. When you stop reacting instantly, you start choosing deliberately. When you stop explaining everything, you start revealing only what matters. And that selectiveness creates gravity. The quiet man is not empty. He is contained. Contained energy feels controlled. Controlled energy feels powerful. You don't need to intimidate anyone. You don't need to perform dominance. You need to master yourself. Because self-mastery is visible. It shows in your timing, in your tone, in your pauses, in your eye contact, in your restraint. And restraint is rare. If this message resonated, comment silent. Not for the algorithm. For yourself. Because the power of silence is not about others fearing you. It's about you no longer fearing silence. And once you are comfortable in silence, you become comfortable in any room. And comfort in any room is the foundation of influence. Noise demands attention. Silence commands it.